Hey everyone, welcome to the channel, Doomed Productions. Last week, I just released my first animated short film on YouTube. It's out right now, you can check it out. It's really short, and I'm gonna be honest, if you watch it, you probably won't be too impressed. But again, that's because it was my first animated little short film. For those who don't know me, I'm a director. I principally direct feature films, live action, and I've dabbled in animation before. It's something I kind of got into a couple of years ago. I think it was around 2021 or 22, I want to say. I can't remember exactly. Um, and ever since I started doing it as kind of like a hobby, little fun thing to learn, I've really wanted to create an animated project that exists in itself. That's not like a little doodle kind of thing. It's not a part of a bigger project, just something that I can make to finally say like, hey, I'm an animator. I made this by drawing and animating. While I don't think it might not be the most impressive thing, it was a really fulfilling creative project for me, and it took a really long time, and it was really creative fulfilling pretty much because it's something I've really wanted to do for a long time. So even though it's not perfect, and it's there's flaws in it and everything, and I learned a lot from it, and I wanted to give a little behind the scenes view of how I made that project for anyone who's interested, or maybe if you want to get into animation, you can kind of look at how I did it, and then maybe take some inspiration for yourself. So just for context, my background with animation prior to making this short film was pretty much just as a fan. I've grown up watching animated films, probably like most people these days, watching all the Disney movies and discovering anime and all sorts of great, wonderful animated films and that sort of thing. And so it wasn't until 2021, I was working on a project called Two Little Ghosts at the time. And it was a little Halloween movie. And when I was writing it, one of our YouTube friends, Joel Haver, released a video about how he did EB synth animation, because that's a style that he kind of developed, and he's become really known for doing these retro rotoscoped animations. And he made a little tutorial on how you could make those animations as well. And I saw this as I was working on planning out this movie, and I thought, oh my gosh, that looks like a lot of fun. I should do that with this project, and I should make my little ghost movie. I should make this an animated film. And so I had written it as a live action thing, but then I shifted, and I was like, okay, this is going to be a rotoscoped 2D animated film. And I did a couple tests with EB Synth, and I was not happy at all. I thought it turned out really poorly. I didn't like the workflow. I didn't like the style that I had done. I didn't like how it turned out. And it made me really appreciate what Joel Haver does and what other EB Synth animators do, because it is a beast you have to wrangle. And I just lost all patience, because the experience for me was essentially, drawing a couple frames and then sending it into a machine, and then you wait an ungodly amount of time, and then you look at the result and it's not even that good, at least for me. I really love what Joel Haver does. I think he's crafted that style really well with his animations. But in that frustration and sort of like anger at this software that wasn't working for me, I had this idea to myself like, well, I bet I could learn to 2D animate quicker than it could take me to learn EB Synth, and I'd do a better job at it. I don't know why. It was just something that came over me. In that moment, I decided I'm going to learn how to 2D animate, and I had never animated before in my whole life. And I had Blender. I'd used Blender before, not for animation, but for 3D modeling, 3D rendering, and I guess 3D animation with keyframes, but very simple animations, nothing complex. But there's a tool in there called Grease Pencil, and I pulled up Grease Pencil. Rather than learning how to do everything step by step, I just kind of jumped in. I just said to myself, I'm going to animate this movie by hand like this. I guess not by hand, but you know what I mean, by on the computer. To make a long story short, I was not successful at that. But what resulted from the months of working on this animated project was, instead of doing the whole film of Two Little Ghosts animated, I turned it back into live action, and I have a little animated music video sequence right in the middle of the movie. Technically, if you count that as its own animation, that is the first thing I properly animated that's released. But again, it doesn't exist on its own. It kind of is within the context of a larger film. So that was the first animation thing that I ever did. I did it all in grease pencil. I did it all with just a computer mouse. I didn't have a stylus or anything. And it took a long time. It took something like 60 days or something. It didn't take me that long to learn it. When I first opened grease pencil, I want to say that was December. And I think from December to March or so, I was working on this, what was going to be a feature length animated film. And I got a lot of progress done, but ultimately I decided to shift focus and make it just a music video sequence instead. And so then what I did after that, I kind of scrapped all that work I had done for a couple months and I said, okay, I'm going to start over. I'm just going to animate a music video sequence. And I did that, and that took me 60 days. I didn't study animation. I didn't really look at, tutorials or anything like that. I learned how to use grease pencil. I watched a simple tutorial on how to do the bouncing ball technique exercise, but that was it. I just kind of did it all just by eye, just by looking. What really helped was watching their animated movies and going frame by frame and seeing how they did things. That was really helpful for me. After I finished that music video sequence, I thought, whew, glad it's over. I'm gonna do another animated film one day, and I don't know what it'll be. I know it'll be short, and I'm super excited. And I just didn't know what it was gonna be, but I was super hyped for what it was gonna be. So that's where Ballet Moon comes in, and the idea for Ballet Moon came to me, I believe, about fall of 2023. Now you might ask yourself, "Gee, you worked on two little ghosts in 2022 or 2021 and 2022. How come there was so much time between working on your next animated thing?" And well, I had ideas for other things that I thought about doing. I'd written some out, I'd done some storyboards, but nothing was really speaking to me. I also spent a lot of time just doing exercises. And I purchased you can't really see it. I purchased a little tablet and a stylus, and I had an iPad. And so I was messing around with different programs. I was messing around with Procreate. I was using the stylus and tablet on grease pencil and all that sort of thing, just kind of playing around and seeing what I could do. But then the other thing did was I actually started studying animation a little bit more by the book. So I got this textbook, which probably every animator's probably heard of. It's probably old news. This is nothing like, I'm not an original by citing this. This was referred to me, this book, which is, it's a really, really good, I guess, animation Bible, I guess you want to say. It was really, really helpful. And what's most helpful about it is there's examples, frame by frame breakdowns. There's lots of fun exercises you can do. And so pretty much between finishing the Two Little Ghosts music video to doing Ballet Moon, or starting production of Ballet Moon, I read through this book. I was doing a lot of exercises. I was practicing, not necessarily consecutively, not consistently, um, because again, I do live action stuff primarily. So usually, what would happen is if I'm really busy with live action stuff, I wouldn't do too much on animation. But if things kind of cooled down and wasn't as crazy and chaotic, I would spend a lot of time animating and doing stuff like that. And so Ballet Moon came to me fall of 2023, the fall after we shot our big feature film. And while we're working on post production for that feature film, the kernel idea that I guess where it started out ultimately was, it was just little thumbnails in my sketchbooks because I carry around sketchbooks wherever. I was drawing a lot of figures from ballet and dance because there's good poses, and I kind of just came to me, hey, what if I did a little short film that would be impossible to do live action style because you're limited in live action with what you can do tremendously, but in animation you can just do whatever you want. So I thought, what if there was a ballerina that was like a statue on the moon, and then a spaceman goes up to her and like kind of wakes her up. And I thought it was just a really cool, simple premise that could turn into something really cool. So I started thumbing around with some ideas and just doing some little thumbnails and drawings in my sketchbook. In fact, I pretty much boarded the whole movie in thumbnail format in one of my sketchbooks. I think I'm gonna try to show some video and pictures of that now. And this is just kind of where I just spit out any ideas I had. I was just playing around, thinking about how this thing could go. The sketches aren't even that amazing, but it was just something to point me in the right direction. What makes this project different than any other project that I've done? I mean, I guess the big projects I've done anyways, is I didn't write this one out first. What I did was I just started drawing and just seeing where the visuals took me because, after all, this is drawing animation. It's a visual medium. I knew I wasn't going to have very much dialogue. I think there's some Cal Arts exercise that I learned about that they give to all first year students. So all first year animation students at Cal Arts, I think they have to do a short animated film. It has to be in black and white, and there can't be any dialogue. And I think it has to be under 5 minutes or so. And so I was like, great, I'm going to start there. Ballerina on the Moon, boarded out my idea. And then after that, I was kind of like, oh, gee, what do I do next? And then I think I just took some brief notes that were something like, here's what you're going to do next. And before I moved forward with actually animating, because I really just wanted to jump into animation, I knew that, like, gee, I had to design my characters. I had to design the spaceman, the ballerina. I had to do turnarounds and, like, design how this character was going to look throughout the whole, all from 360 degrees. I needed to do proper storyboards. I needed to do mood boards. I needed to do a production schedule, and then I actually just had to animate it and do the backgrounds and stuff like that. And so that's what that's what I did next. Was I got in my sketchbook and I started doing some loose designs. Now, I will say this to anyone. This is one of the flaws of the film, or at least in my process anyways, was I did not spend enough time designing these characters. In fact, I really didn't even do any turnarounds for the characters. I kind of had some vague notions of what this character was going to look like in the project, but I really didn't do very much visual development on the characters. And as a result, the character animation was pretty inconsistent in terms of proportions, what exactly the designs are exactly. I mean, they look roughly the same, but clearly there's hairlines are in a different place. There's buttons that are missing. There's a lot of stuff that's very, very different. So something I learned from this is you definitely have to visualize your entire movie beforehand in terms of the character design work. And it will just make everything a lot easier. It's not enough just to draw a picture of your character. You have to draw thousands of pictures of your character from every angle before you even animate them. Because again, when you're animating, you're going frame by frame. You're seeing angles of people and things that you're not usually paying attention to. Like if someone turns their head in a really unique, interesting way, you need to know what that's going to look like from any given angle. So doing all those drawings is something that I wish I'd spent more time on. But again, I was really just excited just to start animating. I knew I wanted to have a cool ballet dance in this thing. I'm not a dancer, but I know some dancers, and I took my girlfriend's little sister Raquel, who's been in some of our projects. She has dance experience and she's done ballet. And so what I did was I kind of talked her through the scene and what I wanted, what was going to happen. And we set up a little mini studio in my living room where I just put up some backdrops, a green screen, and like some black cloth. And I had like a little pillow for her frame of reference. And I said, okay, in this shot, the dancer's going to do this, and they're going to do this, and something like this. And so she would dance for me and show me what it would look like. And I would capture the angles and I would capture the kind of shots I was looking at, almost treating it like a live action shoot, so to speak. I didn't think I was going to rotoscope it necessarily, but I just knew I needed that references of the poses. So after I shot that reference footage, what I did was I started the storyboards. I just downloaded a template off of online. I took it frame by frame, or I took it shot by shot. Some shots have a couple different drawings in my storyboards, but this was probably my favorite part of the process, to be honest, was telling the story from beginning to end in the storyboard format, because it's just a nice way to visualize your movie. Because it's all in your imagination, and it's visual key drawings that should convey your story. It is like you're making a comic book. And when you're done, you can have this nice little binder with a cover page, and you could almost turn your drawings into a comic book if they're that nice. And so there's something really fun about that process. Now, my next mistake that I made after this was I should have done more um, development beyond the storyboards. And what I mean by that was I use the storyboards and I turn that into an animatic. What I should have done at the time was I should have done brand new drawings for the animatic and just started doing the keyframes rather than just relying on my storyboards. I think that's another thing that I learned in this is that you either got to make your storyboards really precise and really fine and like polished and everything, or you really need to have you need to do the keyframes after you do the storyboards, because I was kind of, again, I found myself in a place as I was animating of, oh, I'm really not as prepared as I should be. I should have done some more work with specifically the movement of everything. Because after that, after I did the storyboards, I just started animating. And the way I would do that, I believe I started with the backgrounds. I think I drew all of the backgrounds for the film first. It was just done in Procreate on my iPad. And then afterwards, I animated in Procreate Dreams, because Procreate Dreams had just been released, or had been released like a year or two before I started animating drawing for this film. And to be honest, the two things that I didn't do, which in terms of I didn't polish my storyboards enough or do any more development visually, and I didn't develop the characters enough, I really struggled with animating. I found it really tricky to know my characters or draw the characters when I didn't know them. And as a result, I definitely think the film suffered, but I definitely learned from that, and I'm not going to make that mistake again. And to be honest, the first the ballet character as a whole really intimidated me, because I was like, gee, I don't know how I'm going to do this at all, because you know it's hard enough drawing on paper and pencil just by hand, just one drawing. I don't know how I'm going to animate it necessarily, but um, I persisted and I started with the spaceman character. The spaceman character was very crudely done. I there's definitely improvements that could be made with just basic animation techniques, but again, I was in this weird spot of being a little lazy and not wanting to do the ballerina and kind of putting it off and just trying to get through the spaceman as quick as I could. And so after I did the backgrounds and after I did the spaceman, from there, I tested out the ballerina. And the very first shot I tried to do of the ballerina, I almost gave up this entire film because I thought, oh my gosh, this is so difficult. Um, and my process of that was effectively, because I'd never animated like this before. I'd never used my iPad or Procreate to animate a big project like this and a character like the ballerina. So I didn't quite, my workflow wasn't quite what I was used to. What I ultimately, I tried out a lot of different things, but what I ultimately decided to do was I would take the reference footage that we had shot for the dancer. I would then draw circles on top of the dancer. So I wasn't rotoscoping necessarily, but I kind of was, where I would draw like a circle over Raquel's head, a circle over her elbows, over her knees, over I drew circles all over the different joints in the body, over main key parts, and I would kind of block out the shapes, because again, I needed to see how those basic shapes worked. And I found that when I did that, it was a lot easier to visualize. Once I had like circles that were essentially animated, because I would track like her hand, for example, frame to frame, I would have this really cool animation of just a circle moving across the frame. And you wouldn't necessarily know what it is if you didn't know what I was doing, but I would look at that and be like, okay, I need the hand to go here. And then from there, I would design my character and just draw it right on top of those circles. So it's this weird, I guess you could call it rotoscope with extra steps, because again, I wasn't quite rotoscoping the outlines of the real life reference, but I was kind of rotoscoping circles onto the reference for reference points, and then I was drawing on top of those circles. So it's a little convoluted, but it was a process that, there's definitely changes. I'm going to do things differently when I do the next movie, but that's how I animated the movie. Again, I almost gave up after doing that first animation shot. But once I saw this thing in movement, I was kind of like blown away. Not because I thought it looked incredible, not because I thought that it was the best animation shot that I'd ever seen. I just thought it was really cool that I pictured a shot in my mind of this spaceman and this ballerina on the moon, and it took too long. It took a lot of hard work, but then I was able to draw it and make it come to life. I thought that for whatever reason, seeing my drawings move like did something to me inside, mentally, spiritually, whatever you want to call it. And I was like, that was too cool to give up on. Even if it's like not super polished, even if if it looks like this or whatever, I should move forward. I should finish this movie because I got a huge dopamine rush seeing a finished animation shot of specifically of the ballerina. So that's kind of just, after you do that first shot, it's just kind of rinse and repeat. You just do the next one and the next one and the next one. But something that I can talk about that is probably the less fun, not as, or I guess not as fun creative bits, is more of the scheduling, how I did the schedule. Now, for scheduling the animation, I didn't do anything crazy. I kind of just went on YouTube and looked at other people who had done animated films and see how they done it. So I didn't reinvent the wheel necessarily. I just took a template from a YouTuber animator on online, and I just stole from her format. But pretty much what I got going on is a Google sheet with a shot number. I have a shot duration, which I didn't really use. Number of frames I didn't really use again. Again, I wasn't as prepared as I probably should have been. And then I had a name or description of the scene or of that shot, and I just wrote, spaceman stairs, dancer's feet move, that sort of thing. And then I did like kind of a rating scale of like how difficult was this shot going to be, because what's kind of cool with animation is you can take things out of order. So I knew that if the kind of rule I gave to myself is, I'm going to do a really difficult shot and then I'll do an easy shot, or I'll do a couple of easy shots. And that's kind of how I balance things out. And then there's just the different steps of animating, which is the background, the roughs, the cleans, the color, edit, and then finished shots. And then I also put down some due dates. I did this at a snail's pace when I first started. Again, I started this whole film work on this film in fall of 23, and I finished this movie in January of 25. So pretty much all of 2024 I spent animating this. And I was really slow at it. Before we released our big feature film and there was a big push to do some editing, I think I animated about half of everything. And then after the movie was done, edited, released, I went back to this animated film and I made myself a proper schedule to keep. And I put due dates on the very end. And so I was able to finish things up in January of 25. Um, and I started about, you know, 2 years prior, roughly 2 years. Um, I would say the most productive time of animation probably took place between September of 24 through January of 25. That's where I got a lot of hard work done. And it was just, let's see, September, October, November, December, January. Yeah, like 5 months of going at it pretty hard. Um, and so scheduling is a big thing that you want to stay on top of. And I know for myself, it's really hard to balance animation with doing all these other live action stuff. However, I do know that like if you are consistent and you keep a steady pace, that actually works surprisingly well rather than cramming everything into a short amount of time. I found that like a really fun part of the process. And then once I had all my shots put together, I kind of exported the project. I put it into Final Cut. I threw down some very simple sound design. I put in some music that I composed, and I just finished the movie essentially. And there's not much to it other than that. Um, Again, how I feel about the project was, I'm just really proud that I made it, and I'm really happy with that it exists. That something that I had dreamed about, I was able to make come true and draw, and I think that's a really really cool thing. And I'm definitely planning on making more animated films in the future, and I've definitely learned some things making this. I don't think it's perfect. I think there's a lot of like visual flaws. I don't think the animation is as consistent as it should be. I definitely think I should need to plan things out more in the future. Um, but yeah, I'm just looking forward to starting the next project because animating is really really fun, and I would encourage any filmmaker who's working in live action to try it out, even if you're just animating one shot or just playing around with that technique. You learn a lot about directing and filmmaking through drawing and animation, and yeah, it was just an incredibly rewarding process. Um, right now, I'm already planning out my next animated film. I'm doing a ton of character development. I can give you some little sneak peek here. I got some character design stuff that I've been working on. I'll skip over some spoiler stuff. Um, but yeah, as you can see, it's dance related. Doing a lot of just designs and playing around with different stuff. This is probably, I don't know. I like storyboarding quite a bit, but I also like character designing stuff a lot too. And this has also been super, super fun to think about the next one going forward. Because I have it all planned out and I'm really hyped and excited for it to happen. But when that happens, I don't know. But until then, you just have Ballet Moon that you can watch. You can check out the Two Little Ghosts animated thing. Um, but yeah, I'm curious to know what you guys think about animation. Any live action folks out there? I'm curious if any of you have tried doing animation, whether it be stop motion, 2D, 3D, anything like that. Um, and I would love for you to share any advice that you learned if you've worked on animated films, because again, I'm trying to learn still. I'm not a master by any means. And yeah, I'm just really happy that this movie's out and everyone can see it and you can watch this process of how do you go from not knowing anything about animation to making an animated film. So yeah, that's it for today, everyone. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you feel so inclined, hit like and subscribe because we got some really fun, cool stuff coming out here soon. We just made a new feature film, live action, called Happy Halloween. That'll be out later this year, so you want to stay up to date when that drops. But yeah, thank you so much for watching, everyone, and have a good day.